It was late at night when I first stumbled upon it, the kind of late when the world outside is silent, and your own thoughts start echoing too loud in your head. I had just finished a long day, my eyes glued to the screen, mindlessly scrolling through the dark corners of Reddit when I found a post titled, "Want to see the other side?" Now, you have to understand, I wasn't one of those thrill seekers who would fall into the trap of clicking random links from sketchy forums. I wasn't naive. But curiosity got the best of me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. There was something eerie yet oddly inviting about the message. Maybe it was the anonymity of the internet or the feeling of wanting to prove I could handle it. The post contained a link. "Just click it and you'll know the truth," the message said. I sat there staring at my screen for a solid minute, trying to reason with myself. But after a while, I clicked. It opened a new tab. The background was black, the text minimal, almost too minimal. Only one sentence, "You're here now. Do you want to go further?" My heart began to race. This didn't feel right. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I should have closed the tab. I should have. But I didn't. I typed in, "Yes." Immediately, my screen flickered. The words on the page were replaced with a sequence of numbers and letters, like something from a hacker movie. For a moment, I felt like I was lost in some kind of algorithmic labyrinth, but then, like a door opening, a new page appeared. This was the dark web. I had read about it, of course, who hadn't? But seeing it in person was entirely different. The forums, the hidden markets, the encrypted chats. It was like peering into a world where the rules didn't apply. It was raw, real, and darker than anything I had imagined. I should have logged off then. But instead, my eyes were glued to the screen as if I was staring into the abyss. Then, out of nowhere, a message popped up in the chat. "You don't know what you're messing with. Leave now while you still can." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Something in the message felt personal. It felt like a warning. I should have taken it seriously, but I didn't. I clicked again, navigating deeper into the shadowy underworld of the dark web. But this time, I noticed something. A small icon, just a blinking red dot, appeared in the corner of my screen. It wasn't there before. And that's when I felt it. Someone was watching me. I quickly minimized the page and started scanning my computer. The red dot stayed. The fear in my chest surged. Who had access to my device? What had I just stumbled into? It was only the beginning. The worst was yet to come. I shut down my computer and sat there in the darkness, breathing heavily. My heart was thudding in my chest, and my hands were clammy. The whole idea of the dark web had always seemed like an abstract concept. A place for hackers, criminals, and the insane. But now that I had seen it firsthand, I realized how naive I had been. I kept thinking about that red dot in the corner of my screen. It felt like a countdown, like someone was waiting for me to make a move. My rational side told me to just forget about it and go to bed. But there was a deeper part of me, one that was driven by curiosity, telling me that I needed to go back. I was in too deep now, and there was no turning back. I finally opened my laptop again, cautiously, as if the device had become something foreign. I braced myself for what I might find, but when I logged back into the site, something was different. The page had changed. No longer was it just a simple forum, but instead, there was a live chat window. The message was waiting for me, "I see you came back. You don't know who you're dealing with." I froze. My stomach turned. It wasn't just some random message, it was addressed to me. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was intentionally tracking my every move. I tried to shut everything down, to unplug the internet, but the message continued to flash on the screen, as if mocking my attempts to escape. "You're not getting out." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my mind racing. Should I respond? Should I fight this? Every logical part of me screamed to turn off the computer and run, but I couldn't. I had gone too far. I typed back, "Who are you?" The response came almost immediately, "I'm the one who knows what happens next." Suddenly, I felt a chill down my spine. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. It felt personal. Like I had just entered a game where the stakes were real, and I was nothing more than a pawn. I sat there, paralyzed, staring at the blinking cursor, waiting for the next message. I wanted to close the window, but it was as though my fingers were glued to the keyboard. Something in the back of my mind told me that there was a larger game at play, and I had no choice but to keep going. I could hear the clock ticking in the silence of my apartment. Tick. 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 And then, the next message appeared. "I'll give you a choice. You can continue down this path, or you can leave. But if you stay, there's no going back." I was running out of time. Every instinct told me to get out. But the curious part of me, the part that had clicked the link in the first place, was pushing me forward. I felt like I was being drawn into something that was far beyond my understanding. I hit reply. "I'm not afraid." The response came back in seconds, but this time, the words were different. Darker. "Then let's see how long that lasts." Before I could process it, everything on my screen went black. I panicked and hit the power button. Nothing. Then, a message appeared. This time, it wasn't on my laptop screen, it was my phone. "Your time is running out." I felt a sinking feeling in my gut. Was this some kind of sick joke, or was something more sinister happening? I looked around my apartment, as if expecting someone to be standing behind me, watching me. There was no escape now. The clock was ticking, and I had no idea what would happen when it reached zero. The air in my apartment felt heavier, thicker. I could feel the walls closing in around me as I stared at the phone screen. The message had been sent in a way that was almost too precise, too deliberate. My thumb hovered over the screen as my mind raced. Should I call the authorities? Should I tell someone? But even as the thought crossed my mind, I knew it was too late for that. Whoever was behind this had already proven they knew more about me than I was comfortable with. I opened my laptop again, hesitating for just a moment before turning it on. When the screen lit up, I half expected to see a message waiting for me, but there was nothing. Just a blank page. My heart raced. It felt like a trap, like I was being baited. Then the text box appeared. "Welcome back, Alex." My blood ran cold. I hadn't even entered my name. There was no way they could have known it, unless they were already inside my system. Panic hit me like a wave, and I scrambled to unplug my router. But before I could disconnect from the network, another message appeared on the screen. "I see you figured it out. You think you can hide?" My hands were shaking, and my mind was spinning. I glanced around the room again, but everything seemed normal. It was just me and the glow of the computer. But that sense of being watched, it never left. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, something, was lurking just behind the shadows, waiting for me to slip up. I tried to disconnect the computer from the internet, but the screen flickered. The entire system shut down, and the power button on my laptop remained unresponsive. It was like it had been taken over, hijacked from afar. I sat there, frozen, listening to the quiet hum of the apartment. Then I heard something else. A sound outside. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the more I listened, the clearer it became. A knock. Soft, deliberate. My heartbeat quickened as I stood up, my eyes scanning the apartment. The knock came again, louder this time, from the door. It felt too real, too close. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hadn't told a soul about what I had stumbled upon online, so who could it be? I moved toward the door slowly, my breath shallow. The knock came again, this time louder and more insistent. Knock. 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 I peeked through the peephole, but there was no one there. I felt a surge of dread hit me. How could that be? I could hear it, clear as day. My hand trembled on the doorknob, but I couldn't open it. Not yet. If I opened the door, would I be stepping into some kind of trap? I backed away slowly from the door, but then I heard something that froze me in place. A voice, soft and almost indistinct, coming from the other side of the room. It wasn't in my head. It was real. You're not alone anymore. I whipped my head around, searching for the source of the voice. Nothing. The room was empty. My eyes darted from corner to corner, trying to make sense of the situation, but the only thing that made sense was the fear coursing through my veins. Then the phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hands trembling. The message was from an unknown number. You're not safe in your own home. You should have stopped while you could. I dropped the phone, my mind reeling. How did they know where I lived? How did they know I was here? I needed to get out. I needed to leave this apartment before whatever was hunting me closed in. But as I turned toward the window to flee, I saw something that made my stomach drop, something I couldn't unsee. A shadow, standing in the alleyway outside, looking directly at me. I felt paralyzed. I knew that this wasn't just some sick online game anymore. Whoever, or whatever, was behind this, they were already there. And I was the prey. I froze in place, my heart hammering in my chest. I knew I had to move. I had to do something, anything to get away from whatever was out there. But my body refused to listen, like it had been paralyzed by sheer terror. The shadow outside the window remained still, unmoving. It was just there, watching. It felt like the entire world had come to a halt, and all I could do was stare back at it through the glass. My breath hitched as I noticed something. It wasn't a normal shadow. It was too solid, too defined. And it didn't look like it was attached to any human form. There was something off about it. My eyes darted to the clock on the wall. Time seemed to slow down, and I realized that with every second I wasted, the shadow was getting closer. I grabbed my phone from the ground and unlocked it, trying desperately to dial 911, but the screen froze as soon as I touched the numbers. The phone buzzed once, then a text appeared, "You won't be able to call for help. You should have known better than to play with things you don't understand." I stumbled back from the window, my heart pounding in my throat. The apartment felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. I was suffocating in this nightmare that was no longer just a digital illusion but something that had bled into reality. I had seen enough crime documentaries to know that some people on the dark web didn't just stop at hacking your devices. They could track you, find you, manipulate everything around you. And that's exactly what I was dealing with now. I needed to get out, but my mind was racing too fast. There were too many ways this could go wrong. The door was still an option, but I couldn't trust it. The knock, those strange messages. What if whoever was watching me was waiting for me to make a move? What if it was all part of some twisted game? I heard a faint noise, something scratching at the window. I jumped, my heart almost stopped. I turned back toward the glass, my pulse like thunder in my ears. The shadow was gone. But the scratching, the noise, it was real. I could hear it getting louder, like nails dragging against the glass, slow and deliberate. I stumbled back, falling to the ground, my mind a blur of panic. And then, as if everything had been timed perfectly, the power went out. The apartment was plunged into complete darkness, and the silence that followed was suffocating. I scrambled for my phone, desperate for light, but the screen was dead. My only source of guidance was the faint moonlight spilling in from the window, and the eerie sound of that scratching. That's when I heard it, footsteps. Slow. Methodical. Moving closer. It wasn't coming from the window this time. The footsteps were coming from inside the apartment. My breath caught in my throat as the reality of the situation hit me. Someone was inside. I moved quickly, trying to remember where I had left the emergency flashlight, but it was hard to think with the adrenaline pumping through me. I felt the presence in the room, like a cold, creeping sensation that chilled me to the bone. I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore, but I knew they were there. Watching. Waiting. I grabbed the lamp on the side table, using it as a weapon, but my hands were shaking too badly to hold it steady. I backed into the corner of the room, my mind racing through the worst possible scenarios. How could this be happening? How could I have let myself fall so deep into this mess? Then, I heard it again. A voice. "You've made your choice, Alex." It wasn't just any voice. It was distorted, like it had been manipulated, echoing in ways that weren't possible in the physical world. It sounded almost mechanical, like the voice of someone, or something, trying to communicate from far away, pulling strings from the depths of the digital void. The fear almost paralyzed me, but then I heard it again, clearer this time. "You should have stopped before we got this far." And suddenly, I felt something, a cold touch, a hand on my shoulder. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The last thing I heard before everything went completely silent was the faintest whisper, barely audible, but clear enough to freeze me in place. "Game over." And then, nothing. The room was silent. The footsteps, the voices, the scratching, everything stopped. For a moment, I thought I had escaped. But the feeling of being watched never left. It lingered, deep in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't shake it. I had survived, but at what cost? I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in the corner of my apartment, waiting for something, anything, to happen. The silence felt suffocating. My body was numb, but my mind was racing. What had just happened? Was it a nightmare? A hallucination? Or had I really come face to face with something darker than I ever imagined? Eventually, the darkness faded. The lights flickered back on, casting an eerie glow over the apartment. I couldn't move for a few moments. My body was too stiff, too shaken. It was as if I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The first thing I did was check my phone. It was dead, as expected. I'd been so focused on survival that I hadn't even noticed it had drained its battery. But as I turned it on, a chill ran down my spine. The screen was flooded with messages. All from the same unknown number. "Did you think it would end just like that? You should have stayed away. We're always watching." I turned off the phone immediately, my pulse racing. I wanted to call the police, but deep down, I knew they wouldn't believe me. They couldn't understand what had happened. The dark web was an enigma to most, and explaining what I had experienced would only make me sound like a paranoid fool, or worse, like I was just playing a game. A game I couldn't win. But the worst part? The fear I felt was real. Too real. The sound of the doorbell made me jump. I glanced nervously at the door, my heart hammering in my chest. There was no way I was answering it. Not after everything that had happened. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, followed by a soft, deliberate knock. The voice from earlier echoed in my mind. "You've made your choice." What choice? The choice to click a link? The choice to dive deeper into the darkness of the internet? I had done something I could never undo. I had opened the door to a world that wasn't supposed to exist, and now it was here, right outside my door. I tried to push the thoughts out of my head, but the knocking persisted. A steady rhythm. Insistent. But what if I just imagined it? Maybe the fear was making me paranoid. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I crept toward the peephole, my breath shallow. I had to know. I had to make sure there was no one out there. What I saw through the peephole wasn't a person. It was something far worse. A figure, wrapped in a dark cloak, standing motionless outside. But it wasn't just their presence that froze me. It was the face, or the lack of one. Where their face should have been, there was nothing but an empty, hollow void. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was trapped. Trapped in my own apartment, stuck in a nightmare that had no end. I ran to the window, hoping for some kind of escape, but when I pulled back the curtains, I froze once again. That same shadow I had seen earlier was back, standing in the alley below. But this time, it wasn't just watching me. It was moving, shifting, like it was stretching toward me, closing the distance between us. I turned back to the door, terrified. There was no escape. No way out. It was only a matter of time before they came in. And then, just like that, the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. It was a pregnant pause, heavy with threat, as though whatever was waiting outside was savoring the moment, enjoying the fear it had caused. I wanted to leave. I needed to leave. But my legs wouldn't move. My mind was screaming, but my body refused to obey. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, before I heard a new sound, a low, mechanical hum, like the whir of a computer fan. It was coming from my laptop. I ran over to it, my hands shaking as I opened the lid. The screen flickered, and the familiar dark web page appeared. You thought you were free, didn't you? I couldn't even process what I was reading. I just stared at it, my mind going blank. The messages were there, just like before. Only this time, they were different. They were more specific, more invasive. We know everything about you, Alex. Your location. Your family. Your past. You can't hide. The fear that surged through me was unlike anything I had ever felt. I could feel my stomach drop as I realized the truth. It wasn't just about me anymore. They had everything. They knew everything. And there was nowhere left to hide. I stared at the screen in horror, unable to tear my eyes away from the chilling words that seemed to taunt me. It was like they were watching me, waiting for me to react. The weight of their knowledge sank into my bones. They knew everything. They knew where I was, who I was. They were always watching, always one step ahead. My mind raced. How? How could they have gotten all this information? I hadn't shared anything online that I wasn't supposed to. My social media was locked down tight. I never revealed personal details. But somehow, they had found a way in. And now, they had me in their grip. The laptop screen flickered again, and the message changed. We told you there was no way out. A sense of dread settled in my stomach. This wasn't just some sick game anymore. This was real. Whoever was behind this, they had control. They had power over me in ways I couldn't begin to understand. The feeling of being watched, the whispers in the dark, the messages that had felt so cold and calculating, was no longer an abstract fear. It was visceral. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to check it, I already knew it was them. I reluctantly pulled it out. The message was waiting. I see you haven't learned yet. It's only a matter of time. I slammed the phone down, too terrified to even consider responding. What was left to say? Nothing would change. I couldn't escape. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room, my hands running through my hair. My breathing was shallow, and every small noise in the apartment made my heart race. Was it them? Were they already here? Then, I heard it. A soft sound, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable, came from the direction of the kitchen. A faint tapping. At first, I thought it was a branch brushing against the window. But then the tapping grew louder. Closer. More deliberate. I felt the blood drain from my face. I cautiously approached the kitchen door, my feet heavy with fear, each step seeming louder than the last. I reached for the handle, hesitated, and then twisted it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. The tapping stopped. I stepped into the kitchen, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. The room felt wrong. Off. I couldn't explain it, but there was a palpable sense of unease in the air. And then I saw it. My laptop, the one I had just left in the living room, was sitting on the kitchen counter. The screen was glowing, the words flashing in front of me. You think you can run. But you can't hide. I froze in place, my heart skipping a beat. How had it gotten here? I hadn't moved it. The laptop had been in my living room, on the table. There was no way it should have been here in the kitchen. And then, the screen blinked again, and a new message appeared. We're already in your house, Alex. It's time for you to face the consequences. I whipped around, my eyes scanning every corner of the room, every shadow, expecting something, or someone, to leap out at me. I was on the edge, barely holding it together. The lights flickered, then went out completely. For a split second, I thought I had gone blind. The darkness was suffocating, absolute. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The apartment felt miles away, as though I was suspended in a void of fear and uncertainty. And then, the phone buzzed again. It was all I could focus on, the only source of light in the abyss. You're running out of time, Alex. You've made your bed. Now lie in it. I had no choice but to act. I had to do something, anything to get away. I grabbed the phone, desperate to call for help, but the screen was frozen, displaying only the same cryptic message over and over. The phone died in my hand. I could feel my chest tightening, panic setting in. I dropped the phone and reached for the door, stumbling toward the hallway. But as I did, I heard something, footsteps. Soft, but distinct. They were behind me. They were moving closer. I didn't dare look back. I ran through the hall, down the stairs, but the deeper I went, the more the feeling of being trapped closed in on me. There was nowhere safe. No place to hide. My mind screamed for me to leave the building entirely, but every step felt like I was sinking further into whatever nightmare this had become. I had crossed a line, and now, there was no escape. The footsteps were louder now, echoing off the walls, closing in. I knew it wasn't just in my head. They were here. Suddenly, I froze. A voice. We told you there was no way out, Alex. And now you'll understand what happens when you don't listen. The ground beneath me shifted, like something was moving under the floor. I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't move. I could feel the terror closing in, suffocating me, and then, the lights came back on. I was standing in the middle of the living room, alone. But the door was wide open. The chill that ran through me wasn't just from the cold, it was the realization that whatever had been hunting me had already left. They weren't gone. They were still out there, and they were watching. Waiting. The message on my laptop blinked one last time. This is just the beginning. And then everything went dark. I woke up with a jolt, my body covered in a cold sweat. My head throbbed, and for a moment, I couldn't remember where I was, what had happened. I was on the floor of my living room, but the apartment felt different. The air was heavier, thicker. It smelled stale, like something had been festering here for far too long. The curtains were drawn tight, and the windows were covered in a thick layer of grime, blocking out the daylight. I stood up shakily, unsure of how long I'd been lying there. My legs felt weak, my body exhausted, as though I hadn't slept in days. But one thing was clear, I hadn't woken up from the nightmare. I looked around. Nothing seemed real anymore. The furniture, the walls, the clock on the wall that read 2 p.m., everything was wrong. The apartment was exactly as it had been before, yet there was something off. Then, I saw it. My laptop was open on the coffee table, the screen displaying the same eerie message. "You've made your choice, Alex." My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't touched the laptop since the night of the terror, and yet here it was, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I staggered forward, my hands trembling as I reached for it, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. What if it was just a trick? What if this was all a trap, some final step in their twisted game? I didn't want to know. I was done. I should have never clicked that link. I should have never let my curiosity get the best of me. I glanced at the door. The entrance to my apartment stood wide open, as if inviting me to step outside, to leave, to escape this nightmare once and for all. But my mind screamed at me, "No, stay inside. Don't go out there." Because if I did, I knew that whatever was behind this wouldn't just let me walk away. I turned away from the laptop, stepping back into the middle of the room. The silence was unbearable. But then, I heard something, a soft clicking sound, almost like fingers tapping on glass. The noise was coming from the door. I slowly, cautiously, turned toward it. My eyes locked on the figure standing just outside, looking through the cracked door. I couldn't see their face, just the silhouette of someone, standing still, unmoving. It was the same figure I'd seen before, the one that haunted my every step. I couldn't move. My legs refused to cooperate. Then, the voice. "You had your chance, Alex. Now, it's too late." The figure stepped forward, the light from inside the apartment casting an eerie glow on their face. It wasn't human. At least, not entirely. There were no eyes, just dark, empty sockets staring back at me, as if they were looking straight through me. The skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched too tightly over the bones. It was like something unnatural, something that didn't belong. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. It was them. The people, or things, behind the dark web. They had found me. And now, I had nowhere to run. The figure raised a hand slowly, extending a finger toward me. The tap, tap, tapping sound filled the air again, louder now, filling my ears with the beat of inevitability. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch as they reached for me. And then, just as I thought I was about to be consumed by whatever nightmare had taken root in my life, the figure stopped. It tilted its head, as if it were considering something. A decision. And then, in a voice so cold it sent a shiver down my spine, it spoke one final time. "This is your last chance, Alex. You can choose to walk away, or you can stay. But remember, there's no coming back once you make your choice." I felt the weight of its words, felt the decision pressing down on me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave, to find safety. But I knew deep down that it wouldn't matter. There was no escaping what I had awakened. There was no going back from this. I took a step forward, unsure of what was happening, my legs shaking beneath me. I wasn't choosing to fight. I wasn't choosing to give up. I was choosing to face whatever had been waiting for me. The figure disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving me in the same eerie silence that had consumed my apartment. I didn't know if I had made the right decision. All I knew was that I was standing at the edge of something far darker than I could ever have imagined. And for the first time, I realized that the game had never been about survival. It had been about control. And they controlled everything. I turned and walked toward the door, unsure of what awaited me outside. But I knew one thing, the dark web had followed me into my life. And it wasn't done yet.